This week, we're going to zoom in on just 1 week in India. But wow, what a week it was. It's this perfect snapshot of a country running at two speeds at once. On one side, you have this incredible push to build the future, and on the other, a world of trouble knocking right at the door.
And that right there is the big story we're going to unpack. You see this massive forward push? Think new airports popping up, next-gen hydrogen trains, even leading the global charge on AI. But then, in the very same week, bam, you get hit with oil crises, currency shocks, and all this regional tension. So the real question is, how on earth do you juggle all of that at the same time?
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at that massive infrastructure leap. Then, we'll dive into the world of headwinds that hit India. After that, we'll touch on the shifting dynamics in the neighborhood, how India is rewriting its own rulebook, and finally, how it's trying to future-proof the entire society.
So let's kick things off with that first section, India's infrastructure leap. We're talking about building the country's way into the 21st century, one massive project at a time. Okay, so let's start with a number that kind of says it all. Over 160. That's how many airports India has now, up from just 74 back in 2014. That is just wild. This week, the big news was the new Noida International Airport, but you have to see it as part of this much bigger picture. The goal is to connect literally every corner of the country by air.
And it's not just about more. It's about building smarter. Check this out. India just became the fifth, that's right, only the fifth country in the entire world to successfully test a hydrogen-powered train. This thing is a beast. It's a huge step into green tech, and the only thing it emits is water vapor. That's it. This whole infrastructure push isn't just on land or on the rails. It's hitting the seas too. They announced India's first ever port of refuge. Now, what's that? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. A designated safe haven for any ships that get into trouble out at sea. It's a really important piece of the puzzle for maritime safety, bringing India in line with global standards. So let's go back to that Noida airport for a second, because it's a great example of the thinking here. This isn't just a building where you catch a flight. We're talking about a massive, nearly $1.5 billion investment just for Phase 1. It's designed to handle 12 million passengers a year right out of the gate, and the design itself is inspired by traditional Indian architecture. But here's the kicker, the real strategic move. It includes a major MRO facility. That stands for maintenance, repair, and overhaul. This one feature turns the airport into a hub for the entire region's aviation industry. Super smart. Okay, so everything's looking great on the home front, right? Building, innovating. But here's the twist. None of this happened in a bubble. While India was busy building its future, a perfect storm of global crises was gathering, and it was about to hit India's doorstep. And it all kicked off right here, in the Strait of Hormuz. This tiny strip of water is basically a superhighway for oil. Something like 20% of the entire world's supply passes through it. So when tensions between the US and Iran flared up, this vital artery for the global economy suddenly became a huge risk, a massive choke point.
And what happened next was a classic domino effect, and you could watch it happen in real time. First, you have the conflict in the Strait of Hormuz. That creates a ton of market instability. Then, on March 27th, Russia jumps in and says, hey, because of all this instability, we're banning gasoline exports for 4 months. The final domino to fall? The Indian economy. By the end of the week, all that pressure pushed the rupee down to 93.72 per dollar.
And that wasn't just a number on a screen. It had a real, immediate financial impact. To stop the currency from falling further and to handle the shock, India had to use its rainy day fund, its foreign exchange reserves, and they had to use a lot of it. We're talking about a $19 billion drop in just 2 weeks. That is a massive amount of money to spend to keep things stable.
So you might be asking, what was India's move in all this? This is super important. Remember, India imports over 85% of its oil, so the stakes couldn't be higher. The government's official stance was something they call strategic autonomy. Basically, it's a tightrope walk. They called for de-escalation, for everyone to calm down, but they also made it crystal clear they weren't going to be a mediator. The number one priority was protecting India's own interests, its own economy.
All right, so the world wasn't just throwing problems at India. It was also changing in really interesting ways, especially right next door. A major political shift was happening in Nepal, and it was a big deal. So meet Nepal's new Prime Minister, Balindra Balan Shah. And just look at this guy's resume. He's only 35 years old, the youngest PM Nepal has ever had. His background? He's an engineer, and also a famous rap artist. He started out as the mayor of Kathmandu, and now his party just won a huge majority in the election. We're talking about a massive shakeup, a complete generational shift in leadership right on India's doorstep. So, with all the stuff happening on the outside, the good, the bad, and the unexpected, India also took this week to turn its attention inward. It was time to look at rewriting some of the nation's own rules for business and society. First up was modernizing the country's corporate laws. A special 31-member parliamentary committee was set up with a pretty clear goal: get a report ready by the monsoon session. And what are they looking at? Well, two big things. One, decriminalizing minor business offenses, basically making it so you don't have to worry about jail time for small mistakes. And two, beefing up the National Financial Reporting Authority to make sure the oversight is strong. It's all about making it easier and safer to do business in India.
At the same time, a really important debate was happening around the Women's Reservation Act. This is the law that sets aside seats in government for women. So here's the deal. The way the rule is written, the law can only kick in after a new census is done and after they redraw the electoral maps. But here's the problem. The 2021 census got delayed, which means this law might not actually happen until after 2030. So the big idea being talked about this week was a proposed solution. Just delink it, cut the connection to the census, and you could get this thing implemented way, way faster.
All right, for our final section, let's look at how India is trying to future-proof its society. This is all about tackling the big, long-term challenges in health, farming, and tech. This week was also World TB Day, and India had some incredible progress to report. Just look at these numbers. They've managed a 21% reduction in new cases since 2015. Over 20 million people have been screened in the latest campaign, and they've rolled out 3,000 AI-powered X-ray machines to catch it early. But the goal is the really stunning part. They want to completely eliminate TB by 2025. That's 10 years, a full decade ahead of the global target.
Then, the focus shifted to farming. With the UN declaring 2026 the International Year of the Women Farmer, India hosted a big global conference. And the whole point was to change the story. For too long, women in agriculture have been seen as invisible laborers. The future, as India is pushing for it, is to see them and empower them as what they really are: independent entrepreneurs who are absolutely essential for our food security.
And to cap it all off, this week saw India take a major leadership role in the global AI conversation. They hosted the India AI Impact Summit. And this is a big deal because it's the first major global AI event ever hosted by a country from the global south. And the conversation wasn't just about who has the coolest new tech. The key focus was on the tough stuff: AI ethics, governance, and how we can make sure that as AI develops, it benefits everyone, not just a select few. So that brings us full circle, right back to the central tension of this one single jam-packed week. On one hand, you have a nation building its future at a breathtaking pace. New airports, hydrogen trains, leading on AI. But at the exact same time, it's getting hammered by global oil shocks and currency crises. So it really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? As India builds its future at record speed, can it actually build it strong enough to insulate itself from all the chaos in the world?